Right. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to another YES Talk, YMCA Education Series Talk. Thank you for joining us today. My name is Pam Rakansky. I'm the facilitator for YES here at the North Suburban YMCA. It's a pleasure to welcome you today to Maggie Nash from the Josselyn Youth Programs. She's the Director of Mental Health Education there. Today, we're talking about Let's Talk About It, approaching uncomfortable conversations about mental health. So Maggie's going to talk to us. It can be intimidating to talk about health, especially mental health, but just having an initial conversation can help save lives. So we're going to learn some concrete strategies to stay and to start today, to start and continue our conversations with Maggie. And so with that, this program will last about an hour. Maggie will take questions at the end. We'll feel free to put questions in the chat box if you'd like, and we might be able to catch them as the conversation goes, it looks like, with the shake of the head. So feel free to do that. Everyone is good. All right. And with that, we'll get the program started. Please welcome Maggie Nash from Josselyn.
Thanks, Pam. I love your energy. Yes, let's go. Thank you for that wonderful introduction. I am very excited to be here. I'm going to pull up our PowerPoint slide, but like Pam said, feel free to put questions and things in the chat. However, I do like to check the chat as much as I can because mental health is very messy. And you are here all having your own experiences, lived experiences. And so to put those questions to make it more applicable for you and what you're seeing is really, really important. So I'm going to share my screen here. I said that I had practiced it, and then of course, I feel like I haven't done lots of Zoom stuff in a while. Here we go. All right, share. Can we all see that? Yes, thanks, Pam. All right, so I'm going to share my slides here from beginning. So like we talked about, or like Pam did in her introduction, we are going to talk about having uncomfortable conversations. I have been training mental health and doing some mental health education for about 3 years at Josselyn. I was a teacher beforehand, so I have my master's in education and in social work. And I have trained over 4,000 people in the past 3 years in this small little 1 hour space, as well as our bigger mental health first aid space. And so a lot of what you're going to be seeing today are things that I've pulled from really being in the community and seeing what we want to talk more about, hearing more about, and barriers that keep us from having these conversations that, yes, can save lives. So like I said, we're going to sort of discuss, why are we here? Why has mental health become such on the forefront, especially after the pandemic? Talking about those warning signs, what to look out for, because we cannot have a conversation if we don't know what we're looking for and why we're having a conversation. And then some of those strategies, tips, and tools to have that first initial conversation, and then what to do afterwards, right? And yes, it's great once we break down that wall and start to feel more vulnerable. And how do we continue to check in, right? It doesn't end right there. And then some questions and answers, but again, please just write in the chat. I like hearing from people. It's a small group, so why not? That's why we're here, right? So to begin with, I'll just sort of explain Josselyn. Josselyn is a community mental health center. We are in Northbrook, Northfield, and Waukegan. So if you see here, these are all the services that we offer. We do one-on-one therapy. We just had a partnership and a merger with Family Service of Lake County. So we have a really up and coming senior center and senior services that are coming up that they were starting beforehand at Family Services of Lake County. We have psychiatry, lots of partnerships to provide psychiatry for Medicaid, which is really hard to find. And then we have our youth services, what I am in charge of. We have a teen intensive outpatient program that is run by our wonderful director of our IOP for our teens. We have a therapeutic summer day camp, which is 3 weeks away, which is what I'm directing. So that's very exciting. This is one of our pictures from our camp. All of our campers are there for free because of Medicaid. So we bill for Medicaid for those programs. And then we have some amazing community programs. We have the living room, which is free for anyone 18 or older, basically runs 12 hours a day by our wonderful peer services. We have a drop-in center, also free, available at any time, just as sort of a alternative to the ER, right? We know that that can be really traumatic. So as I'm talking through all of these strategies, these tips and tools, right, they're only as helpful as the resources that we know in the community. And so just making sure that, again, we know Josselyn and some other amazing resources. I'm happy to answer questions on that as well at the end or during our time today. All right, so why are we here? Why has mental health have been such a big topic of conversation? Ultimately, when the pandemic first started and launched, we saw that there was a state of emergency, right? We were seeing a teen crisis. This came out in 2021, right? And it's not over yet. We do hear this idea of the pandemic is over. But some of us are sitting up being like, but wait a second. We went through so much, right? Sure, I'm not wearing masks, but I can feel still the lingering effects, right? And so, yes, sure, maybe the threat or the fear of some of that is over. I think that really kind of reduces the amount of effect and impact that the pandemic had on us, right? So ultimately, how I look at the pandemic as having an impact is that we were forced to experience symptoms of mental health challenges, right? And we'll talk about symptoms later in our time today, but basically we were forced to isolate. Right? Many of us were coping before the pandemic very naturally, walking, interacting with others, going to restaurants, going to the movies, right? That was stripped away from us. And we were forced to sit in our feelings without coping mechanisms, without being prepared for it. And so for some of us, that was really, really, really tough. For a lot of us, that was really tough, right? We were forced to be very cautious, right? Over careful, not sure how to interact, not sure if we're doing the right thing, right? Which can weigh on us. And then, which did save a lot of us, we were able to interact with our loved ones because of social media, right? It allowed us to have the connection that we were taken away from. But now we have to sort of figure out, where is this line, right? Because it does tend to have a impact on our mental health, the constant comparing, the constant hard discussions that come up, the things that we can see, the filtering of news, all of those types of things, right? So we do need to start to understand how to work through that. And then we ultimately, all of us had some sort of collective trauma that we experienced, right? Seeing the news, that can be considered trauma. Seeing and hearing loved ones that are struggling, right? That can be secondary trauma. And so all of us have experienced some sort of level of toughness that is going to need time to heal. And we need to start to have these conversations because we're seeing it impact us. And so to get that intervention as soon as possible, right? To have these initial conversations is crucial so that it doesn't continue, right? I do think there will be a point where we'll reach sort of that equilibrium of, okay, people who are struggling with their mental health, they would have beforehand or are getting the help they need. And then those who did have the impact of COVID, the impact of the pandemic, were able to heal the way that they deserved and need to. So part of Josselyn's mission and goal, which is mental health for all, is providing that tier 1 level support, that initial support of better understanding how to have conversations, how to assess, right, how to intervene, and then the resources that are out there. So this is a shortened version of a bigger, larger version that we teach, which is Youth Mental Health First Aid. It is a national curriculum. This is where I've trained about 3,000 people in the past 3 years, schools, libraries, organizations, corporations, sort of that, again, that initial conversation. So if you're interested in learning more, being part of our one of our trainings, please let me know. It's all updated on our website. We actually have a free community training coming up on Thursday that I will be leading. So it's been really exciting to see the amount of people who are really hungry to learn more about this, right? And then we know that there's a teen crisis. And so we also train teen mental health first aid, which is helping teens better understand what's going on, but then saying, well, my joke is, don't steal my job. I'm also a therapist. That's my job to treat and to diagnose. Your job is to understand, to have a conversation and get an adult. Right. And so we have been in 12 different schools in the area and have trained a lot of the teens as well in this curriculum too. So based on what I've seen in the community, what are people looking for? There's an overwhelming amount of people wanting to have more examples of what are possible mental health challenges, having conversations about coping mechanisms and coping strategies, how to help a friend who you might think is suicidal and you're concerned about. What is my best way to do that, right? When do I intervene? How to support, and then really like in the moment, practicing discussions, getting together as a community. And so this is one of those shortened, again, like I said, shortened trainings that, can be part of a larger conversation. So before we're able to even begin to intervene, right, we need to know what we're looking for. It can feel really hard when you go to help somebody and you're like, I'm concerned about you. And they're like, why? What did I do, right? Our defenses go up, our walls go up, we feel like we're weak, we look a certain way. So we do need to do the work to say, hey, I'm seeing this. And I've heard that this can be something that's concerning, right? And so that's why I always start this with kind of figuring out, grounding ourselves in what could be a concern, right? And that first starts with actually defining mental health. I do find that mental health is very much a buzzword right now and is being thrown around sort of all over the place. And mental health we all have. We all think, we feel, and we act. Hard stop. That is mental health. Thinking, feeling, and acting, right? All of us have it. All of us will experience maybe some struggles with it, but not necessarily experiencing a challenge. A challenge is 2 weeks or more of not thinking, feeling, and acting the way that you want to. This does not mean it's going to last forever, right? This just means, hey, you don't have to live this long feeling this uncomfortable for 2 weeks or more, right? There's people out there that can help you. And that might be a, hey, we got to stop and we got to take a second, right? And take care of ourselves, because that's too long. We've all had a bad day. That does not mean we have a mental challenge. We've all had a bad week where we've had to recoup, we've had to reset during the weekend. That does not mean we have a mental challenge, right? It's really this 2 weeks or more. However, mental health is messy. So when we say 2 weeks, I trained a teen once and he goes, but what happens after 2 weeks? It's like, you explode. No, but you have to figure out what feels good for you, and 2 weeks can feel too long, right? And then there's a mental health disorder. This is going to be diagnosed by a mental health professional, right? It's going to be long-term. It's going to be needing to maintain, right? And you can live a wonderful, healthy life with a mental health disorder, just like you could if you're diagnosed with a physical disability. Maybe it's asthma, right? You use your inhaler, you can still live a wonderful, long, happy life, right? So there's also this spectrum that I like to look at, right? We have this healthy coping. We all fit into this stress space. We might not all experience poor mental health, which is we're unable to cope, right? We're unable to work through the hard stuff. We're all going to experience the hard stuff. Mental health is not saying take away the hard stuff, but it is saying, okay, can you work through it? Can you know that it's not going to last forever? Or is it weighing on you to the point where you can't live your typical life, right? And you might end up in a crisis. And that's where we are technically, we're mentally ill. We have mental health illness, and we need to take care of ourselves. We might need to go to the hospital, right? Just like you would your physical health, you might have to end up in the hospital at some point. That does not mean that's going to be awful forever, but it's just something that we need to work through because we're unable to cope through it on our own right now. You'll hear me say this a lot. I continue to compare the physical to the mental health, right? Because I joke with the teens, I'm like, humans are sometimes simple. We like to see things. And so with physical health, it's a lot easier because we see it. With mental health, now there are some things that we can start to notice, right? And start to say, I think this could be mental health, a mental health issue or challenge, right? But a lot of times we just better understand this. And there's so much less stigma around it, right? So if we continue to compare, it actually helps us better understand and get the help that we need to those individuals who are experiencing a mental challenge or disorder or diagnosis, right? So you heard me say asthma. Let's say you're diagnosed with diabetes, right? You're not unhealthy. Now, the first time you find out about it, you might end up in a crisis, right? You might have to go to the hospital. However, you can get insulin and you can eat healthy and you can live a very long, healthy life. This is the same thing when we have a mental health disorder, right? Bipolar disorder, depression, anxiety, any of those that we hear about. Just because we're diagnosed with that doesn't mean we can't live a long and healthy life. We just might need to do some extra things, take medication, all of those types of things to get to that point where we are living our healthy life. Here are some of the most common mental health disorders that we're seeing. However, I want us to stay away from diagnosing. So I am just going to go straight into the signs and symptoms. It is not our job to say, I think you have depression, right? That's technically my job, and I don't even like doing it because it doesn't let me see the human for who they are, right? So we want to see the signs and symptoms and say, hey, I've noticed this. How are you doing, right? And we'll talk about some concrete skills in a second. Here are some of the signs and symptoms that we might notice, right? So again, like we said, signs are things that we can see. So you could see mental health challenges, right? With appearing sad, lack of hygiene, speaking I always think speaking quickly, I speak very quickly, but that's just because of coffee and nothing else. Trembling, shaking, withdrawing. So all of these things we might not be hearing from our friends or family. We might be hearing them say things like, nothing's ever going to get better, right? I'm a burden to everyone. So these are sort of those generalizing or catastrophizing sentences. And then symptoms are things that an individual is feeling that we as the helper might not hear or see, but we can ask the right questions to better understand, right? So we might see racing or disconnected thoughts, lack of memory, lack of motivation, switching emotions really quickly, right? Overwhelmed fear for no reason. It doesn't connect to the reality of what we as the outsider sees going on, but there's clearly an intense fear that they're experiencing. And then we also see physical discomfort, headaches, stomach aches, and all of that kind of stuff. So as we talk about mental health, right, it's really important to understand some of those things that keep us from experiencing a mental challenge or getting a diagnosis, right? Which is, we have protective factors being things like connection, right? Family, support, things like coping mechanisms that we have access to, right? Social economic status, other things like that, right? And then we do have risk factors. And I think what happened, again, if we're talking about why is this so prevalent right now, we all experienced a lot of risk factors, right? Change, abrupt change, possible change in your income or your family life, right? And so these were risk factors, and all of us experienced them a lot more, and our protective factors went down, right? And so that's where we start to see some of those concerns with our mental health come in. And then these are all the different examples of things that can be risk factors. And I think this is something too, as the helper, right? Somebody who is helping a friend, we want to be on the lookout for some of these as well, right? So if we see our friend or a loved one and they get injured and they can't do their activities, right? That could be a risk factor because they're no longer coping the way they used to, right? Or we see that they're being bullied, or that they're not being treated correctly, or they are having a really hard time at work and work isn't supporting them, right? These are all things that can be risk factors. It might be two genes. Maybe what you've noticed is that their parents or their grandparents have been diagnosed with things, right? That doesn't automatically mean that somebody will develop something, or can, but it is a risk factor, right? And now, so those are all the sort of like, again, I've talked very quickly, but all of the things that we can be on the lookout, right? The definitions, the grounding, and now it's our turn as helpers. What do we do? What can we do to have these conversations, right? Because ultimately, and there's a video that we share the teens, I train teachers, and we show them this of saying, most people don't come to you and say, hey, I'm struggling with my mental health, right? It's us as the helper to say, hey, I've noticed this, and it is okay to talk to me about it. And it is okay to not be ready to talk about it. And so these are all the things that I'm going to quickly cover right now in this short period of time. Here's sort of my overall thought of how to have a uncomfortable conversation. I think the ultimate piece is we want to express love first, right? I describe relationships almost as like a bank. You want to put in the money before you maybe have to withdraw something, right? So we want to put in the love, we want to put in the understanding, we want to put in the like, I care about you, before we get into the whole like, hey, this doesn't feel right, or what you did wasn't, didn't feel like you, or, that judgment space that we might, unfortunately, because we're human, we might hold, right? Or how they might feel us judging them, right? So we're going to go through these steps in this way that I do think sandwich sort of a hard conversation. But I also have this phrase of when in doubt, talk it out. If you are ever not sure what to say, how to say it, when to say it, say that. So if you're going through this and you're like, Maggie, I'm not going to be able to remember this. You've had too much coffee. You're talking too fast. Whew. Okay. What hopefully you take from this is saying it's better to say something than nothing at all. It's better to say, I don't know how to help you, than to say, we don't talk about those hard things, so I'm not saying it, right? So holding that to be true, we're going to go through some of these other steps that hopefully one or two things stick out to you of like, ooh, I could see myself saying that. right? It's not helpful to read something that you're never going to say, like, I don't say things like that. However, I do think there are some pieces that you can take of this, right? Which is saying that, like, that piece of, I care about you, I love you, I'm noticing this, right? I'm not sure I'm doing this correctly, like I said before, but I really want to help, right? Do you want a solution, or do you want me to listen? This one's good. Because I think a lot of times we jump to solving when ultimately we don't need to solve it, right? They kind of need to do that. So you want to ask, do you want advice, or do you want me just to listen, right? Also, when we jump to give solutions, we kind of give the impression that that feeling, that experience is bad and we need to fix it, right? Where that's actually not what needs to happen. We need to sit in it for a second, experience it, and then figure out what to do with it, right? So can you tell me more about this? Help me understand what this is. This sounds really tough, right? Again, it's that expressing that love, that validation, but that does not mean that we're enabling. So I think that's really important to state here, right? Saying you love somebody or that looks tough to them does not mean you're saying you can keep doing what you're doing, right? Two things can be true at once. We can express love by also saying, this action, this behavior, this thing that's happening is concerning, and I don't think you want to continue this, right? And that's exactly, we'll keep going in our process here. I think it's really important before we jump into solving, fixing, or doing any of that, right? That advice that, hey, you got to change that behavior, or, ooh, that's not healthy. We want to figure out where the feeling is coming from. So I always being curious is better than jumping to that fixing, right? So what we want to say is sort of like, so what did happen, right? Who was there? How did people respond? What were you feeling like before, right? What did you feel after? What was that like for you? And so you're actually allowing that person to experience what they went through, right? Oh wait, actually, this wasn't as bad as I thought now that I'm talking about it, right? Our heads tend to jump to all these negative things, but when we start to tease out what actually happened, it tends to be less than what we actually experienced. And so when you're checking in with somebody, you say, hey, I've noticed that you've been falling asleep in our meetings lately. That last meeting, what was going on? Right? And then you sort of can go through some of these steps of these questions to see, yeah, like what was going on beforehand? Okay, right? So then you're sort of just, again, being that curious self of like, I want to know more and I want you to open up to me, right? And then we may need to help them identify feelings. I always make the joke when I'm training mental health first aid. I have a master's degree in how to put words to feelings, and it's still really hard. So this is not something that you can be like, I'm sad. Like, it can be really hard to tease out, is it that I'm really sad, or am I really mad about this? Am I excited about my new job, or am I really nervous because I think I'm gonna fail? Those are two different things. So giving somebody an option also allows them to, again, be curious about their own feelings, and then also allows them to say, oh, this is what's going on. And then we can sort of work from there. I love the question of, are you worried you can't do it, or do you not want to do it? Those are two different things, right? Is this connected to work, or is it connected to something that's happening at home, right? If we want to adjust this for older and or for a work situation or something like that, right? Is this connected to family, or is this connected to a friend, right? So again, providing those options allows someone to also regain a little bit of that power and control that they may feel lost, especially when we're struggling with our mental health. Sometimes we might feel as though we've sort of lost control or power over our own lives. So this is one that I think tends to be more prominent when I'm working with parents or the adults at home for kids. But sometimes when it comes to mental health challenges and they're acting on ways that aren't healthy, right? We can notice that they're not productive coping mechanisms. Sometimes there's natural consequences that we just sort of have to let happen, right? So they may do something that then they're like, okay, well, I lost this or this happened. You're like, right, this is what happens when we do this. So then you don't really need to do anything. There are some times where, yeah, logical consequences do need to happen, right? Hey, you know what? This happened, so we actually have to take this next step, right? Or sometimes boundary setting, that can be really, really uncomfortable. But if you've done everything you can, you've done the check-in, you've done the this, sometimes especially because it's not our job to play therapist, right? Don't take my job. Sometimes you have to say, you know what, this is out of my lane. And now my mental health is feeling like heavy. And so I got to take a step back, and actually we can't use we got to figure out what to do here, right? It might be talking to them less, right? It might be not providing them with financial support or other things like that. Sometimes that is the logical consequence because there isn't a change happening or there isn't the next step happening. Sometimes it's, again, offering professional help. Research shows that if somebody close to them suggests professional help, they are more likely to get it, right? So somebody like a parent or a friend says, hey, you know what? It's okay to get help. It's okay to talk to a therapist. They're more likely to get it than, somebody else that may not be close to them. Coping strategies. Do you want to go for a walk, right? Offering and teaching some of those skills. And then talking to another adult, right? It might not be you. Sometimes when we're the helper, we're like, they're not talking to me. They're not sharing with me. Okay, maybe you're not the right person. Maybe there is somebody else, and asking that, hey, I noticed that, I've asked these questions and I'm not sure there's so much, like, you're not sharing too much with me. Is there somebody else that you'd feel comfortable with? That's okay to say. It's actually a huge skill to know when you're not the person to do the help, right? There are times where I'm like, I'm not the therapist for everyone, and that is okay, right? And then if you do this help, continue to check in weekly, not daily. You don't bombard them every day. But I would say do a weekly check-in, right? I had a friend that I was concerned about. I set an alarm on my phone. I said, I'm just going to text. I'm going to try to text once a week just to do, hey, how are you doing? I'm here if you need help, right? I'm here if you're ready to talk about it. I know you weren't last time. That is totally okay, right? It's on your terms, right? So again, giving them those options and those suggestions as well. So this one here, I think, as we talk about having uncomfortable conversations, it's really important too, as we think about some of, unfortunately, the spiking in death by suicide, it is asking the uncomfortable questions of, okay, I've done this work, my friend is withdrawing, right? I see multiple warning signs. I see multiple risk factors, right? We may have to ask the uncomfortable conversation of, are you thinking about suicide, or are you thinking about taking your own life? This is a really hard question to ask. However, research shows that an individual will say yes or no, or on some sort of spectrum, right? I'm not thinking about suicide, but I thought it would be better if I wasn't here, right? If we don't ask these questions, a lot of times that individual is dealing with it in the dark place on their own, right? So as a helper, we are shining the light in the dark place. We are allowing that conversation to exist. And we also are actively destigmatizing by saying, you know what, this is something we can talk about. It's not something that you can be afraid to talk about it, because as a clinician, it is still hard to ask this question, but I know that it's crucial to, right? So if there's a yes, it's drive to their emergency room, call their therapist, call a professional. You can call 988. That is the new suicide hotline number, just like 911. It's now 988, and they will help you figure out those next steps. It's possibly driving them to Josselyn's living room, right? Like we said, our living room, free for 18 or older, and works as an alternative to the ER. So if you're not sure what to do, you can drive an individual there, and one of our peer services will help you there, as peer specialists will. If it's a no, we do want to believe them. And you can say, I believe you. That statement right there, I trust you, I believe you, puts so much power to that other person who may right now be feeling like they've lost that control or that power. And then saying, however, the question, suicide is really intense. And so what else is going on then? Because it's big enough for me to ask that question, right? Be curious about what is going on. And continue to have the conversation of, I'm going to keep checking in with you, right? Let's get coffee on Thursday. You promise? Saying I promise is also another big piece, right? And so again, it's taking some of these steps that can feel uncomfortable, but the individual in front of us is going to be feeling more uncomfortable than asking the question. And then there's a piece that I think is really important, that as we go out of the as we've claimed pandemic is over, sometimes the people that we're helping, the people that we're chatting with, the people that we're supporting and concerned about, they just need us to be the one to hold the chaos. I heard this in a podcast one. I think it's just a fantastic understanding of what and how a helper can be so influential, right? It's just saying it is safe to experience these hard feelings with me. Now, if they last again for 2 weeks or more, or we're there for a full day and it's not, calming down, that's where we may need to get somebody involved. But if it's for an hour and the tough stuff's really tough, give the space, right? When I trained during the pandemic, somebody in the training said the same letters in silent are also in listen. And I think that was super impactful, of just saying sometimes it's saying nothing and letting somebody just be there to say the things they need to say. And this other piece I think is important, of saying all emotions are okay. Every single one of us in this space, the small group that we have, has experienced sadness, anger, frustration. It's okay. And what we do with it can either be okay or not okay. How we react can either be okay or not okay, right? And so that's the piece that is important to say, that emotion is okay. How we handled it and worked through it actually wasn't okay, right? So what can we do next? And then sometimes it's just saying, man, that sucks. There is so much strength in those 3 words that it is okay to say that and nothing else, right? I think that, again, even asking somebody and letting them say to you, yes, that's exactly what I need, right? Do you need me just to hold this for you right now? Right? It allows them to figure out too, what am I looking for as somebody who might be struggling with my mental health right now? Am I looking for that support, that change in professional help, any of that? Or am I just looking to let it out and then I feel okay and I can move forward? So some of the, well, it says teen, sorry, y'all. I do a teen version too to the parents, but don't force, right? Don't push somebody to force them to share. That's never going to be helpful. If it's not a crisis, if we're not worried about, immediate harm for themselves or others, then we can just continue to be a check-in and a constant, right? I have some clients where I've been meeting with them for a year and we just started talking about the hard stuff, because it can take time. Point out changes in their demeanor during a conversation. If you realize you've asked a question and they start to shut down or start to react differently, say, you know what, actually, I noticed something changed here. Is everything okay? Right? Let them know that you're here and you're going to listen when they're ready and you can hold it. And one of my favorite things is saying, if I can't handle it, we can figure out somebody who can. Right? Because there are things that are going to be too big for you to hold on your own. Right? Especially if it's a crisis. That is not our job to hold that on our own. There are professionals out there that are trained to do that. And then, again, if it's not a crisis, we just check in weekly, intentionally. Hey, notice this, or hey, let's go get some coffee, or whatever that might be, to continue that space, right? To give them the opportunity to share with you what's going on. And on their own time. Again, it's regaining that power and control. It has to be on their own time. I just like providing this at the end too. I think it's important just to remember that there are a lot of different self-care strategies, even as the helper, right? Somebody who continues to check in, you may need to take care of yourself too, right? It can feel heavy, it can feel hard, and it's natural for that to happen. So there are things that we need to do to take care of ourselves as well. All of this is welcome. It depends on what helps with you. And it depends on if you're helping somebody, what is best for them, right? What helps them? My friends know that I like to go for a run if I'm feeling tough. I do not, or having hard feelings. Do not suggest to everyone that they should go for a run. That would not be helpful, right? So it's thinking about and talking to somebody, what helps you, and then suggesting that when they're going through something tough. And then my last piece, which I think is really important to shift, instead of saying I'm being lazy, right? I think we hear that a lot. Asking the question, why does my body need a rest, right? Have I gone through something tough? Did I work 12 hours today? Did I have a really hard conversation with somebody that was emotionally draining, right? Do I need to do a binge watch of something? Now, if we're doing that for a week straight and not doing what we need to be doing, or going out and socializing or doing whatever, then we got a problem. And then maybe you're being lazy. But it's okay to take a second to say, my body is actually telling me I need this. Listen to your body. Your body speaks to you and it's telling you what it needs, right? And so to be aware of that, to clue into that, right? And then to think about what you've gone through, and then figure out what your body is telling you that it needs to recruit, right? To re-up what and recharge your battery. So I do have this one. It's actually a National Council video, if I'm able to share it, which is just saying, have the awkward conversation and have embrace the awkward silence. So I'm going to see, I did pull it up. So I'm hoping, I think I just need to stop share screen. Okay. And then just make sure my sound is shared. I haven't done this in a while. Sound. All right, here we go. Can you hear
Listen, you're my friend.
I noticed you haven't really been yourself recently.
Yeah, I feel like something's up.
How are you?
Are you okay?
Is there anything you want to talk about?
I just want to know how you're feeling.
And listen, even if you don't know what to say, I'm here to talk.
No matter what you're going through,
I just want you to know I'm here.
I've got your back. When you want to talk, I'm here.
All right. That, I'm going to stop sharing here, because that is sort of how I want to end that. I think, yes, we can think of all the strategies, but I do have this phrase of like, you do you, boo-boo, right? You've got to sort of think about, how do you show up authentically as yourself, as a friend, and then go from there with some of these tools, tips, strategies, all of that. But ultimately, how is it looking like for you, and what does it feel comfortable, and how does it feel comfortable for you? Oh, I got a question. Okay, so the question is, how do you best respond when a teen is self-hating? For example, there's the catastrophizing sentence, right? Catastrophizing words of, I'm so dumb, this is why I don't have friends. I think what's really important is to say, what do you mean by that, right? Was it because we had one bad test, right? Or are we failing in class? Have you heard somebody say this about you before? So it's when in doubt, being curious about what they mean by that sentence. This is why I don't have friends. What do you mean that you don't have friends? What does that look like, right? What is that feeling like for you? Because ultimately, when we start to navigate this type of thing, usually we prove those thoughts wrong. So the goal here is to prove that thought wrong of, no, you're not dumb. And we might be struggling in this class, right? So we can struggle in this class and still be smart. We can have a breakup with a friend. We can go through a period of time where we don't have friends because something's going on, whether it's us or somebody else, or we don't feel like we have this community. And that doesn't mean we're never going to have friends. That doesn't mean that you aren't going to be able to make friends. What does a friendship look like for you? What are you hoping to find, right? So it's asking these curious questions. And then not saying like, no, they're friends with you. No, we can't promise that they're friends with them. We don't know that. But you can say, this isn't going to last forever, right? Here's some, have we opened up to this different friend? Have we tried this, right? Again, I'm making sure that they want that strategy and that support. But I would engage in being more curious about what those statements or those questions mean to them and why they're saying that. And you can also say, hey, you know what, I took this class or I took this training and I realized that that's actually a catastrophizing statement or question, right? Usually that's not the truth, but you feel that way right now, right? It's a really good question. It's hard because teens naturally kind of jump into this thought process. I'm glad we had a question on teens because that's more my space. that's what I got here. If anybody has any questions on Josselyn, check out our website, check out some of the stuff that we offer. If you're wanting the 4.5 training that I do, 4.5 hour training, we have some free trainings coming up. And then we'll jump back into it in August, since I do run our therapeutic day camp, and that starts very soon. So yeah.
Just a quick little thing with that question. Oh, the living room they're asking about too. I coach junior roller derby, and we have a commitment, not a rule because I don't like rules.
Yes.
But we have like 10 commitments that they abide by. And one of them is you can say sorry once, but that's it. So sorry, forgive yourself and move on. So that is a big one that seems to be resonating with them lately. Is just, you know, giving them that space to forgive themselves if they mess up, because we all mess up. So, but yeah. Anyway,
I think, sorry. Yeah.
The living room.
Yes. So we have, it is on our website. I can actually drop our website in the chat if that would be helpful. But our living room is in our Maple building off of Central Ave in Northbrook, or Northfield, sorry. And it is open, I believe, like 9 a.m. to 8 p.m. most days, not on Sundays. And it is free for anyone who might be experiencing something difficult, or we have a lot of our clients or people that sort of hang out there that need a space to go. There's activities, there's things to do. Our drop-in center and living room run in the same space. And run by the same individuals. You can call our phone number on our website, and our intake and/or our receptionist will give you a little bit more of a background too if you have more questions on it. It's a great space. Our peer specialists are amazing. Living Room is a national program, so you can find it in other spaces as well if you Google living rooms near me. Drop-in center is something that Josselyn started.
All right. Any other questions? Okay, with that, thank you. I'll let you put your website in the box. I was
yeah,
go
let me do that right now
quickly, but you'll do it.
Oh no, I can do it. Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you again, Maggie, for joining us today and for all the questions that we had. That ends our YSS program today. Our next talk is actually Thursday about heel hip pain naturally, so very different, but still about healing yourself. You can check out today's talk. It'll be up on our website later on. It's nsymca.org/YS. You can find all of our information there. We are free and open to the public. Thank you so much for supporting us. And thank you to Maggie Nash and the Josselyn Center for giving us this really great conversation today. So I'm
going to put our number in the chat as well, just so.
And then that's Josselyn.org, www.josselyn.org.
Yep. And it is 847. Uh, 441. Sorry, I should memorize this. Just too many numbers.
There's the phone number. That's 847-441-5600.
Yes. Give us a call.
All right. And with that, we are out. If you have any other questions, feel free to contact me here at the North Suburban YMCA, and I will connect you with Maggie. All right. With that, have a good day.
Sam.
Thank you, Maggie.
Bye, guys.
Bye.